friends. Today's story is called The Teeny Tiny Teacher. Words by Stephanie Kalmanson, pictures by Dennis Roach. So before we start our story, I want us to take a look at some of these pictures on the cover. So this is a school. It's called the Lincoln School. But does our school look like this? Do we have pencils holding up the roof of our school? Is our roof a notebook? Isn't that so silly? And look, their welcome mat, it's an eraser. Do we have an eraser as a welcome mat? That'd be pretty silly, huh? So let's take a look at what's going on in this silly school. Once upon a time, there was a teeny tiny teacher who taught in a teeny tiny school in a teeny tiny town. So this building is a library. In the roof, what's that? That's a book. And then this is the game center. And so there's a checkerboard and a deck of cards on the building. And then here is their school that we saw on the cover. And look, these kids are playing jump rope. Is that what our jump rope looks like at school? That's a silly jump rope. One teeny tiny morning, after taking the teeny tiny attendance and singing teeny tiny morning songs, the teeny tiny teacher said, "Who would like to take a teeny tiny walk?" "Me!" called all the teeny tiny students in their teeny tiny voices. What are they sitting on? Those aren't chairs, huh? Do you remember what those are called? Those are called dice. We usually find them in a board game. The teeny tiny students put on their teeny tiny coats and their teeny tiny hats. They made two teeny tiny lines holding teeny tiny hands as they walked to a teeny tiny park. Look how big that bird is and how teeny tiny the kids are. And look how big the flower is. At the teeny tiny park, they found many teeny tiny things. Teeny tiny leaves, teeny tiny sticks, teeny tiny rocks, teeny tiny feathers, and the teeny tiny teacher found a teeny tiny bone. "I will save this teeny tiny bone for our teeny tiny science lesson," said the teeny tiny teacher to her teeny tiny self. She put the teeny tiny bone into her teeny tiny pocket. When the teeny tiny class got back to their teeny tiny room, they hung their teeny tiny coats and their teeny tiny hats in the teeny tiny closet. The teeny tiny teacher forgot all about the teeny tiny bone in her teeny tiny pocket. "Who is ready for a teeny tiny snack?" asked the teeny tiny teacher. "We are," said all the teeny tiny students. While the teeny tiny teacher was filling teeny tiny cups with juice, a teeny tiny voice whispered, "Give me my bone." The teeny tiny teacher smiled, thinking a teeny tiny student was playing a teeny tiny trick on her. "Someone is being a teeny tiny bit silly," said the teeny tiny teacher. Then she handed out the teeny tiny cups of juice and passed around teeny tiny cookies. The teeny tiny students were enjoying their teeny tiny snack when the teeny tiny voice said, in a tiny bit louder, "Give me my bone." Is that what our tables look like at school? Do you remember what those are called? These are dominoes. That's what they're using for their table because they're so teeny tiny. And look on the wall, they have a stamp as an American flag. And here's another stamp as a picture. The teeny tiny students were a teeny tiny bit frightened. They spilled their teeny tiny cups of juice and dropped their teeny tiny cookies all over the teeny tiny floor. "Someone is being more than a teeny tiny bit silly now," said the teeny tiny teacher, with her teeny tiny hands on her teeny tiny hips. "Teeny tiny students who have something to say must raise their teeny tiny hands." A teeny tiny student raised her teeny tiny hand and said, "The teeny tiny voice came from our teeny tiny closet." Teeny tiny closets do not talk, said the teeny tiny teacher. Then she helped her teeny tiny students clean up the teeny tiny room. When the teeny tiny room was a teeny tiny bit tidy, the teeny tiny teacher said, "Who would like to help me write a teeny tiny story about our teeny tiny walk?" "Me," said all the teeny tiny students. They were taking turns telling the teeny tiny teacher what to write when the teeny tiny closet started to shake and rattle, and the teeny tiny voice called out a teeny tiny bit louder, "Give me my bone." Now the teeny tiny students and the teeny tiny teacher were a teeny tiny bit frightened. They hid under their teeny tiny desks. They had been hiding just a teeny tiny time when the teeny tiny voice called out, a teeny tiny bit louder than before, "Give me my bone." This made the teeny tiny teacher and her teeny tiny students a teeny tiny bit more frightened, so they hid a teeny tiny bit further under their teeny tiny desks. They were shivering and shaking a teeny tiny bit when the teeny tiny voice called again, a teeny tiny bit louder, "Give me my bone." The teeny tiny teacher was not about to let a teeny tiny voice frighten her teeny tiny students another teeny tiny minute, so she popped up from her teeny tiny desk and shouted in her loudest teeny tiny voice, "Take it!" After that, the teeny tiny teacher and her teeny tiny students never heard the teeny tiny voice again. And that is the teeny tiny end. So who was making that teeny tiny loud yelling? Who do you think? Who do you think got their bone back? I wonder. The end.